welcome back to Dev Game Club, a weekly podcast in which two veteran game developers look at games from the past to discuss their relevance and impact today. I'm Brett Duville, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, a man who's been gathering loose-leaf paper, some binders, pencils and pens, a new eraser, and is looking pretty spiffy in that brand-new backpack.
Tim Longo.
Hey, buddy. Back to school.
Yeah, actually, not me. My daughter is just beside herself, excited about school. So
I would not describe the same of my teenage son who returns tomorrow.
Yeah, I'm sure it's the opposite.
It is pretty much the opposite, yeah. Although he does have all those things. All those things I described were basically a list of things that he brought to my house today.
Who uses pencils and papers and things anymore? I guess school kids do.
They do. You go off to college and then they just I don't know. They don't even got a class. Yeah, who even knows? But anyway. So here we are talking about Super Metroid again.
Super Metroid.
It's pretty super.
It really is.
It is pretty super. And, as I was telling you in the pre-show, my big question for you is, somebody gives you the keys to the kingdom of the Metroid franchise and says, we need an update to Super Metroid. Where do you go? What do you do? What do you put into this game? What do you take away? Where does it go next? Now, I mean, we've played some sequels to this game, obviously, so it's not like we don't know where they went next, but I'm curious.
Yeah.
What do you think of?
Yeah, I mean, you sprung that on me right before. So, it's one of those questions, like, if I had an answer, I'd be doing even, much better in game development career. But
yeah, I mean, it'd be a shame if you were in charge of some multi-million seller.
Sure, yeah, okay, wise guy.
Second in a row.
Well, I mean, I mentioned it last episode, but we definitely talked a lot about Metroid for the Tomb Raider reboot. And a lot of this, I think there's some of the spirit of that, was retained by the team, which I think, they did a great job kind of having that hybrid in there. A lot of abilities and things. The only thing that comes to mind, and this is literally off the cuff, is so first of all, before I mention what's kind of on the top of my brain, I will say that one of the things, there was a sort of a brilliance in a way, not to maybe I'm overstating it, but Metroid Prime was, when you heard about that project and the and I think all of our skepticism of, first person Metroid, that doesn't make any sense.
In 3D.
In 3D, yeah. Like it just, like all the pieces, just because the 2D games were so, were so beloved and just talked about and emulated. And as we talked about last time, created their own genre, et cetera. We're like, well, this doesn't make sense. Why would you do this? But in retrospect, that I'm sure someone asked them at some point that same question you're asking me. And I think that was a really interesting direction to go in, and they succeeded. I don't think I finished the second one, but the first one was just an excellent game.
Yeah. I got to the final boss in the second one, and I had not gotten enough of the missile upgrades, and so it sits there on my shelf, forlorn.
Of the second one?
Yeah. I literally got to that final boss battle and just can't do it. Couldn't do it.
It makes,
and I'll come back to it.
It makes me really want to go back and play those now, for sure. Now that we're playing this, I just have good, really fond memories of it, and also not having played this one and the original in such a long time, just the little audio cues and music cues, like when you save and reload and all those things, they carried those over into Prime, you know what I mean? Or at least that was my memory, and they're just these little trills that are so memorable, and they did such a good job with them. But anyway, the quick thought that comes to mind, which is total random brainstormy kind of thought, is I wonder if there's something more that you could do with destructible environment, like going crazier in that direction. Like there's obviously a little bit of that with some of the secrets with the bombs and stuff, and it might break the level design to some degree. So I don't know how far you could go, but there's something pretty fun about finding the nooks and crannies that you can destroy in this game. You know what I mean? And
right, sure.
I feel like they're very digital. They're very digital or very binary and kind of pretty pretty specific. So I don't know. I'm just brainstorming, but I wonder if there's something. If you just did the 2D, I assume you're asking about a 2D version, right?
I don't know.
Yeah. Well,
it feels like. I mean, at the time, we were there only a few years after this game, and LucasArts famously at the time had gone all 3D, like right around 97, 98. I think it was at the end of 97, and said everything's going to be 3D accelerated from now on. Everything's going to be 3D games, and I mean that was a big bold statement from LucasArts, especially with its history of the 2D adventures in particular. And I don't think it did particularly well for LucasArts, to be honest. I think that was a little wrong-headed. But that said, I mean, that was a challenge that was facing everyone in the industry at the time. And basically, this is the last 2D Metroid you get until Fusion, which was a Game Boy Advance title.
Which came out with Prime at the same time, I think, right?
Yeah, or maybe in between the two or something like that. I'd have to look
I have it
up.
up here.
Yeah.
No, same year.
Same year, okay. Yeah. I do remember, it was the year of Metroid. I played so much Metroid between those two titles.
I think I have Prime on my 3DS, so I mean Fusion, so I think I might actually break that out.
Oh yeah, it's worth playing. It's a good game. It actually reminds me a little bit of Prince of Persia, and I think you'll see why at some point if you play it. Yeah, the original. But so there's that. I mean, the other area. I mean, I, honestly, when you bring up Tomb Raider, something that you worked on. I think that's another direction you can take this franchise because Samus is established.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we don't know anything about her history, really. And to a certain degree, I think Metroid Other M, which I know you haven't played, and I haven't played very much of, somewhat digs into her past, but she's still, badass Samus of today, not up-and-coming Samus of yesteryear. So I do feel like
reboot. Kind of
thing. Or just to delve back.
Yeah.
Figure out who she is and why she is and how she became,
Go deeper.
Where'd she get this suit? Like, I mean, that suit's crazy.
Yeah. So you've played some of Other M, not to get off track, but I thought there was more of that going on or not necessarily reboot, but there's more character-centric story and things like that.
There is a lot of character-centric story. And the thing that they really messed up is it's very patriarchal, for lack of a better term. I mean, she's got this former commanding officer who she looks up to and says, yes, sir, yes, sir, yes, sir, to constantly. And, you don't have the sense, your sense of the character is a strong, independent woman who just goes off and hunts bounties, and just
well, she's bounty hunter. I mean, they don't typically have bosses.
Exactly. But she comes back into this person who had been her boss and in this place that they're in, and although it controls really well, I mean, it's a really fun game to play, all the narrative structure around it makes you go, this is why Metroid games shouldn't have a narrative. You're just I don't want to see this. I don't, because this is not the Samus that I know.
Yeah.
Right? This is, they give her a voice and she's kind of simpering. And I mean, she's just not, I listened to, this is pretty off topic, but I listened to a This American Life episode some time ago about this woman who became an actual real life bounty hunter. And all these skills that she needed to learn. She made all this list of superhero skills that she wanted to know when she was a kid. When she was 8, she made this list and just kept adding to it. So it's martial arts and knives and guns and she'd be able to drive a car. And she just learned all this stuff. And now she's a professional bounty hunter. At least she was at the time of that episode. And that's the sort of person I think of as Samus.
Yeah.
An independent, strong-willed human being who just takes no shit from anybody, and that game was not that. I mean, it was so the opposite of that it was difficult to stomach, even despite it being really fun moment to moment to play. So,
yeah. I mean, the other thing that comes to mind, if you can follow the thought, it's a little bit of a weird reference, maybe, but kind of 2D with fully integrated world rotation. kind of there's some like Fez, or there's some puzzle games out there where there's still 2D planes for a chunk of time. You know what I mean? But you're actually
the Mario 2D paper Mario.
Yeah, which I haven't played.
Where you can sort of turn. I know you haven't, even though I gave you one. You can turn and go into the screen,
right, in
a very specific way,
right.
But I could see that working.
Something macro world, something with macro world control. You know what I mean? Where you're actually, so it still retains that 2D. Wow, I want to play this game now, but it still retains that 2D plane for like the moment-to-moment micro gameplay, but then somehow you're rotating or diving into the space. So it kind of has that. What was that? Shadow Complex, right? 2.5D feel.
I didn't play it.
But then
I'm too offended by the storyteller behind it.
Oh yeah, no, I actually didn't either for the same reason. I think we maybe talked about this. Yeah, but I just I saw videos and screenshots, but I actually never played the game. But it has that 2.5D, right? Where there's still the plane, just like it is for a regular 2D Metroid, but you have that good 3D depth. And there's a lot of Unity games that are kind of modeling after that too.
Yeah, that's all pretty interesting. Anyway, I didn't mean to put you on the spot. Okay,
that's fun.
Makes for good radio.
I actually want to play that game now.
I know. You should play 1,000 Year Door. Do you remember when I gave you that? Do you remember the occasion?
Do I still have it?
I hope you do, but I still have my copy. I gave you a copy.
Oh, you gave me a copy? Okay. What platform was it for? DS?
It was a GameCube game.
GameCube.
Yeah, you won't be able to play it.
No.
Oh, you don't have a Wii anymore?
No, it's all gone. No, I don't.
Sad.
Why did you give it? Oh, we're way off topic, but anyway.
It was when you left.
Oh.
It was your goodbye dinner, I think.
It's my present, yeah. Mm-hmm. Wow. I'm so insensitive.
You are. It's okay. You don't pronounce my name right. You can't remember my gifts. I see how it is.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
All right. So, what's going on in this next section? Like this next session that we played?
Yeah, so I mean, I feel like it really hits, for me at least, it starts to really hit its stride because you really, once I feel like you get a critical mass of multiple abilities or gear items or weapons, you're really starting to both in a boss fight chain them together, but also use them to backtrack and explore things that you've seen before that you weren't sure what to do with, and now you have something new and you're like, okay, I wonder if it's for this thing, and you're starting to learn the rule set. So for me, I had a blast. Really easy session to play because I just, you just kept going and going.
The hard part is stopping.
Yeah, exactly. I got the ice beam this time as we had talked about, and I was like, oh, I want to keep going. But I forced myself to stop.
As I said in the pre-show, I actually just started over. I just started a new game just because I was so into it.
Yeah.
I got the ice beam and I went and saved. And I'm like, I want to make sure I remember everything I did, but really I just want to play again. And there were some things I wanted to investigate from that first part that I had done kind of in different order. I mean, we heard from readers, listeners via Twitter and stuff that the charge beam is missable, which is not the case for you and me because we're such completists.
Yeah, it didn't dawn on me. Yeah,
but playing it over again, I was like, oh yeah, you could totally miss this. Like, it kind of points you in the direction off to the right where there's, I don't know, a missile pack or something. I don't even remember, but there's another power up right near the charge beam, but the charge beam's kind of hidden below a floor, and for us, we just kind of found that stuff. But I could totally see that. I apologize to anyone who got stuck. I think I'm going to tie our next progress to a boss because that'll be like you have to fight the boss.
Yeah, I wonder if all the beams are falling in that category because I felt the same way about the ice beam. Like it's. How you get to that spot, I'm jumping ahead a little bit to the end of the playthrough, but it just felt a little more hidden than I had anticipated, and I thought I was just going to find some more missile packs or something kind of in a more secret area, and then I go in there and because it has those little blocks, right, that you have to turn into a ball and kind of fall down slowly.
Right.
kind of air steer your way into that one opening, and they give you a clue, which they do really a good job of this throughout the game, of having enemies enter, exit, sections to kind of pull your eye, which is also kind of, great telegraphing. That is kind of telegraphing 101 stuff, but they do a great job in here. And so I was like, oh, something must be in there. And then it ended up being the ice beam. And then I'm thinking, well, you maybe have played farther, but I'm wondering if there are any critical path times you need to use the ice beam, knowing kind of what it does. But
I haven't played further, but I expect that that's the case.
Yeah, it could be. I know of one room that clearly I need it, but I don't know what's beyond the room, so I don't know if it's critical path, because they definitely have a lot of circular, macro flow moments, right, where you can come back around, which I do want to talk about that topic in a bit, the full kind of macro level world design of this stuff. Yeah, so,
I actually, I'll get right into it. I actually found a spot playing it. This happened to me the first time, but I found a spot where you can go back and get stuck.
Are you sure? What do you mean, like an A-bug?
Like an A-bug. You are stuck. I mean, you're not dead and it doesn't crash, but you can't move any further back and you can't move any further forward. And this is, if you get the speed boots, whatever they're called. The super dash thing? The high jump boots.
Oh, the high jump boots, yeah.
So you get the high jump boots, and then I had gotten at that point the super missile, I guess, right? The powerful missile that opens the green doors.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I knew, and this is what I had gone back to check. I went back to check that area at the beginning to the right of the ship.
Yeah, I did too.
And I was curious, like, okay, what's over there that, Tim was on about? And I was like, oh, okay, so you can get through this green door. And so once I got the super missile, I went back to that.
There's a red door over there.
And then there's, an orange whatever door. You can't get through. Yeah, not a red door. The red doors you can get through. But like an orange door.
Yeah. That's what I meant.
So you can't get through that door. So I was like, oh, okay. And then I went back through. And then it must not have been after the high. And then I got the high jump boots. Right, okay. So I went back to that, and then I went back forward. I got the high jump boots, and I was like, oh, there's that place that I could jump. I could jump up, and I could get the spazer beam, which you haven't found.
Oh, is that where it is up there?
Yeah.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I haven't gone back to that big open space where the ship is with the high jump boots yet.
Oh, no, it's not there.
Oh,
good idea. No. There's a room with a block that you can shoot out, and you can jump up through the hole, and it gets you access to an area above, and you can actually see that. It's a good little area. I won't go into details.
I'll check it out.
You can. So, but if you go back past that room at that point, like that is, I think, the last but one room. If you go back, one more. And you get into these rooms that have the water. You remember there's some water in the floor?
Mm-hmm. I've been in rooms with water.
Yeah, there's a room. So the room with the spazer beam is the one that has the big, the sort of centipede-like things that come up out of the water.
I've seen.
And they grab you.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's where it is?
Yep. And if you go back past that, yeah, they're terrible. If you go back past that, you can't move forward again, because you go back and you can't jump high enough to get out of the sort of well that you're in, and you don't have a gun that gets you past any doors that are there. But then, because you've got the super jump, the high jump, you can no longer make the jump across to the, to one of the plateaus in the middle. So you basically can't do the platforming anymore because you hit the ceiling.
Because you're jumping too high?
Because you're jumping too high. And even though that's something that's under player control, something changes with the arc of her movement, I think, at that point. I did this twice. I did this once the first time I played it, and then I did it again today going, I want to check that. Was that really, was I just screwing up? And I can't do it.
So it's physically you're not blocked. You're saying you can see where you need to go.
Yeah, you can see where you need to go. And
it's just.
I'm just trying to get back to where I was. Right, I'm just trying to return. So I've gone back, and now I want to go back forward. And I just had to reset it and load a save, from further ahead, and say, okay, I'm not going to do that again.
I want to go try it now because I can't believe that This
I know, it's hard to believe.
game is so watertight. Like
It is.
it is. There's and
like I said, it's possible.
Yeah.
It is entirely possible
But
that
it's
there's
probably
something
super
you
pain.
can do.
Yeah.
But it is highly non-obvious. I tried running and jumping. It feels like you should be able to just jump out of the water and get onto this thing, but you can't. I tried bombing to get extra height. You can there's bomb tricks to get a little bit more height.
Huh.
I couldn't do it.
I was
frustrated as hell.
I was convinced. Yeah, I mean, we should talk about the dash moment that I was convinced. I was like, this is impossible.
Yeah,
and this is
yeah. No, let's do that.
Okay,
yeah, sure.
Well,
let's dive into it.
Yeah, I mean, it's the
because I only got that because I had people watching me play it on stream.
Yeah,
and they gave me hints.
Yeah, well, and then I texted you, and you gave me the hint too. Yeah, I mean, it basically I had. Somehow in the recesses of my brain, I had assumed that the run dash ability was something that was an upgrade to get it at all, not the upgraded one, but just to be able to do it at all. So I would hit B and stuff, and there's no feedback when you do so. Of course, you have to hit B and be running for a couple seconds for it to kick in. And so it didn't even dawn on me that I actually always had it. And so I got to that one section that's down in the lower area, and there's it's a green area, and there's some blocks that fall away underneath your feet, and above you there's metal spikes, and so you can't jump over the falling blocks because you'll hit the spikes, and there's too many falling blocks. So you and I knew that it had to do had something to do with dashing. But I was just going backwards, trying to find the super dash, like the ability that I thought I was looking for, and turns out I had it all along. I just needed to actually use B, hold B down, and do it. And so my frustration really was that I didn't read the manual ahead of time, right? We're just playing this, in the future when people didn't read manuals. And they do train you on the mechanic once you get the super dash, but you need to use the regular dash to even get that. So, so I was frustrated.
Yeah,
I probably spent 45 minutes on that.
This is probably as close to a perfect game design as I've played.
Mm-hmm.
And yet there's still a couple mistakes.
Yeah, and I have a couple more that we can hit later, separate ones. But agreed. No, totally agree. We're down to nitpicking, stuff. Like
it's like, here's this very specific.
Yeah.
If I have these particular you know what? Just occurred to me, I could have turned off the super jump. I'm going to try that.
Oh, nice.
It's possible to disable that. And of course, that's how I got through there in the first place. So, that's maybe how you do it. I'll have to test that. But I think that's
brilliant. Yeah, that's good. Yep. See those revelations.
That was the thing I had a question about. Was like, do you ever want to turn things off?
Yeah.
And I don't remember. I don't think of that. I always think we're trained to think as you get abilities. Now you just have those abilities, and in this game, you can actually disable particular abilities just by, unequipping, I guess, effectively.
Well, yeah, and I could totally, now that we have the ice beam, I could totally, that's the first item that we got that I could totally imagine a time when you'd want to turn that off because you may not want to freeze something,
Yeah, for sure.
Good point there. Interesting.
All right. So, my first mystery in this game that is completely unanswered thus far. So we're kind of switching tacks. Did you find the room with the big gold statue?
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that.
No, I got nothing. I have no idea what that is.
So
you've got Ridley, right? The Pteranodon or whatever.
Oh, is that who that? You mean the boss that we fought?
Right, at the beginning.
His name is Ridley.
His or her is Ridley.
Or her name.
I started looking some of this
Ridley?
stuff up.
What?
I know.
Okay,
like
no,
Ridley.
I knew Ridley was a canonical name inside, but I never remembered who Ridley was. I thought Ridley was some person. It's actually that fairly frustrating boss fight. Yeah. So it looks like it's a combination.
Ridley and then Kraid.
Okay.
So Kraid is the space pirate. Okay. Yeah, so there's a lot of lore in this game that you don't know from the game. The things aren't named. Like one of the things that Metroid Prime added was like the scanning, and you could learn stuff. There's lore about everything.
So good. Yeah,
and I really like that because there's a collector part of me that just wants to collect all the scandals.
Gotta go back and play that. So
yeah, I know, right? It's so good. So you have that, and that kind of fills you in all this backstory, and there's like this mechanic around it. You find these things, and they glow, and like the map tells you that you haven't found them all, and there's just tons of stuff to support it. So there's that. On the other hand, in this, these older games, things actually have names. They just don't have any way to tell you, really. They don't, because there is no mechanic like that. There's no lore-facing mechanic. You just, when I describe those kind of things that were crawling on the walls, those are actually space pirates.
Right. Okay.
Her ancient enemy, right? I mean, it's like the thing she fights in every game is the space pirates, and I had no idea. I just was like, yeah, okay, whatever. So there's these things, they crawl on the walls, they're kind of like, I don't know, insectoid-like. Well, those are the space pirates.
Yeah.
That's why they can fire lasery things. And then Kraid, who's the big fat thing that shoots his fingernails and stuff out of his belly buttons at you, is like, he's basically Jabba the Hutt of the space pirates.
Right.
He's like this big space pirate. That's it. So anyway, he's in the statue.
He's a space pirate that's a dinosaur.
Yep. And then Ridley in the space, this statue thing, this room. I'm baffled. I have no idea. Are we going to come back to that? Like, I'm totally...
Well...
And they all have, like, glowing eyes and
that's
stuff.
What I was going to
colors.
say.
Like, there's these red glowing eyes on Ridley. And then, like, I don't remember. The same color eyes that... like, maybe yellow glowing eyes on Kraid. And then there's a couple other figures who we haven't seen yet. Maybe it's just a huge foreshadowing thing, like, oh, here's the things you're going to have to fight, and... Well,
I don't know if you noticed on the map in that room, the floor is, how it has the white outline.
Right, doesn't have
a white outline. And it looks like the below the water there that it probably could go down or open up or something. Mm-hmm. So I'm anticipating us going down there. Maybe we fight Ridley down there eventually. I'm actually looking at the manual, which the original. Mm-hmm. Wow. Talk about giving everything away.
Really?
They have, you should look it up. They have every item that you're going to find.
Oh, wow.
They have almost every enemy, it looks like, including Kraid, including Crocomire, which looks like probably Ridley's there. Dragon, a little bit of, and then Fantoon.
Fantoon, right?
Yeah, boss. And they even tell you where they are, and then there's a map of the planet.
You're kidding me?
No, well, it's abstract. It's not abstract, but it's not in detail. It just kind of shows you like, okay, this area is the wrecked ship. This area is Norfair.
So it's like when you were
making representative,
D&D maps or whatever.
Yeah, it's hand drawn, but it kind of gives you an idea of what's It even shows, the heat that Norfair is a lava area.
Hot, right. Hot zone.
Meridia is an ice zone. Shows you where the wreck ship is, and then it tells you which boss is in each of these areas. Wow. If you read the description. Yeah, so there's a lot of info here. And it even shows you a fully decked out Samus with all of the slots, so you know what stuff you're going to eventually get.
See, this is just nuts. Like,
yeah, I'm kind of bummed that I'm looking at this because these days, you want that to be more of a mystery.
Yeah, you do.
Discovery, because it's a game about discovery.
Right, and at the same time, we don't expect people to read anything that isn't in the game, right? And even then, we're suspicious that they won't.
We assume they won't.
We assume that they're going to ignore anything that's said to them or that is put on text on the screen. We assume they will skip any cutscenes. So anything that we might give to help them along, we assume they will skip. That's just kind of the way of the modern gamer. Like, just make it so I can get past this without having to read all your bullshit. Yeah, that's basically how we treat our players these days.
Well, we was it with Warcraft that we talked about this? I forget. It feels like we talked about this recently and kind of brought up.
We did. We talked about it last week, actually. I think
the renaissance of via Demon Souls. Kind of
Oh yeah, that's going further back. But yeah, definitely. I mean, the Souls games are probably
just
the
not,
counter argument.
Yeah, not holding the player's hand, and also the fact that they've had so much success in spite of that, which I think is a great trend, and I haven't gotten into those games yet, but I know if I had the time, I would love them probably for those very reasons. But it's just the time commitment, I think.
Yeah, they're a big sink.
I love mastering stuff like that, and that's why I
started Dark Souls, and I played a certain amount and just was like, yep, don't have time. I'll get back to this at some point when I'm between things, and I'll dive in. Okay. All right, so we don't know is the answer to the gold statue.
Well, I think to your point, like each of them has a different color eye, right? And stuff, and so it looks to me like, actually, you know what? I'm going to go back there now that we've fought the big guy, Kraid, and I wonder if his eye is not flashing anymore.
That's an interesting
And so
point,
maybe it's just a kind of the gem motif of like once you kill each of the 4 of them, then it opens up the last thing, and there's 5 here, right?
That's interesting. So maybe you have to kill all the gatekeepers, and
there's 5, and probably that's how you get to Ridley, maybe.
Yeah, that's okay. That's interesting. Yeah, that could well be. Okay, So I'm changing tacks again. I'm just gonna switch tracks on you left and right. One of the things we've talked about a lot just over the course of this podcast period is the economy of design.
Mm-hmm.
And what I wanted to extend that to in this game is actually the economy of character design.
Mm-hmm.
Because everything about Samus interacts with this environment in a reasonable way, right? She's in a suit, that once she upgrades it, protects her from the heat of the lava. She's got this gun arm, which just happens to be the interface to the maps and the energy recharge and the missile, all the different stations. She's got, in later games, she's got kind of visor effects and things like that. So and of course the whole thing turns into this morph ball, right? So it's like, she is built, her character design is built around the economy of what she can do. Like there isn't a thing that's wasted, and there isn't, I never feel like there's
no.
And that's just kind of weird in one sense, right? I mean, it's like in Star Trek where every alien has, is the same, is a humanoid with a funny facial prosthetic, right? I mean, it's like there's this central conceit that she just fits in wherever she goes to all these things.
Yeah, but I mean, that I think that in a subconscious way makes the world and her in the world that much more complete and cohesive too. I mean, I guess it's kind of convenient, but I mean, if you think about, I guess we're getting a little meta here, but if you think about a world like ours that's been built, civilization at least has been built around humans. We take a lot for granted about how we've done that. You know what I mean? And that the world has been built around our limitations and dimensions. Yeah.
Lots of stuff about us. Yeah. Senses.
And I don't know. I mean, I just feel like that's an extension. That by extension, that's what they did here. Her shoulder pads, right, are round because they were trying to, and they did a great job of that in the Prime games too, because it harkens to the morph ball in the way that her silhouette is.
Right. Sure.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I think I don't know. I love it so much because of what I do, but it's interesting that you mentioned that it's weird, because I guess when you mention it that way, you're right. But I love it.
Yeah, no, I'm no argument. I love it too. I just,
but you're right. It's kind of it's very myopic in a way too, right?
Yeah, right. It's very focused on. I mean, it's very player focused in that way, right?
Yeah.
Of course you're the most important thing. right? I mean, of course, everything that you have just happens to interact with the world in an interesting way, right, or a useful way, which is new. Like, it doesn't feel like that's true of Mario or Zelda, which are the other two that we're comparing it to.
Yeah.
Last time. It feels different in the sort of way that she's embedded. Like, Mario doesn't feel the same as the world that he's in. Link doesn't even feel the same as the world that he's in.
No, I mean, well, it's they're heavily playing off of the fantasy motif with Link, right? Where it's like you're getting a sword and a shield, and you're getting a thing that, a boomerang and things that make sense in that world.
And a hook shot, like whatever.
But it's very
you're getting
separate.
all that stuff, right? And and I guess it's true here too. Is that all the enemies are very alien. Some of the places that you go in a Zelda game are not meant for you. They're meant for Gorons, or they're meant for the fish people, or whatever. And here, although you have to empower Samus and give her the upgrades and things like that in order for her to be able to do it, it doesn't fundamentally change her tremendously, right? I mean, her suit colors change when she gets the various suit. She obviously, the gun gets different sort of powers, and she can do the morph thing. Although that happens so early, you can basically think of it as being just part of her early moveset. I mean, because it's like the first thing you get. So, I mean, it's fundamentally, it feels like, this world is built around someone with her abilities, right? I mean, it's like it's like when people say about a movie or whatever that it's just so improbable that a thing would happen. And it's like, yeah, okay, it's improbable, Amnesia is improbable, or whatever hook. But this is the story that tells that as the way it was. Like, this is the one time it all went right, Right. You know what I mean, right? This is when all the stars aligned and the hero could be the hero. Because you do actually find in this game, and I think in the section that we played, you find a dead hero.
Yeah, so good. That? Yeah, it made it a special moment. Really good moment.
And so it's like, well, she's special.
Well, it's foreshadowing before
yes, everything,
right? Wasn't it right before?
Yeah, it is. It's right before Braid.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you've got that. But it also is directly applicable to that eye door that shoots lava balls or something. I don't know. It was a weird kind of thing.
Oh, yeah, that you can't destroy, yeah.
Yeah, you have to use the super missile or something like that to get through. But that person couldn't do that. It's like in the Goonies, right? You're
wow.
Oswald. You're that guy, that adventurer at the beginning, who never made it that far.
Yeah.
And now you're the special people who do, right? I mean, I'm not aiming at any particular. I don't have a thesis here. I just sort of it struck me that everything fits to her.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, it works because everything fits to her.
Yeah. Well, she's a Swiss Army knife. I mean, you mentioned your NPR story or your This American Life story about that bounty hunter, right? It's like,
right.
If you were to,
I'll link that in the show notes. I'll find it.
To your point about kind of the reboot idea or something, or telling more about her backstory, you could totally see that concept of how she built herself up to be essentially able to become a Swiss Army knife because she was a solo adventurer that needed to be adaptable and needed to react to anything, And so she, I don't know whether she designed her own suit or she got it from someone else, and just it's able to be upgraded. I think the only weird thing that I'm kind of looking at the manual here in those, the contrivance they have of the statues that are holding the power-ups is obviously a convenience, right? That she didn't bring those to the table. I don't remember how they dealt with them in Prime because they had a little bit more context in Prime, how they tried to contextualize things. That here it's a little more gamey, but
yep.
Yeah. But that's an interesting point. We're going pretty deep on this one. I like it.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, I love the economy. I love the economy of everything in this. I love that about it, and at the same time, part of my rational brain just goes, yeah, okay, but really?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like it. If I'm not in the moment, I spend time thinking about it. I go, that doesn't make a lot of sense. Like, how is it that,
Yeah.
like just like in Star Trek, how is it that everybody's, bipedal life forms basically everywhere?
Yeah.
Looks like a human being. Like, how is that? How does that work?
Yeah.
Whereas we've seen, in science fiction, we've seen completely the opposite. We've seen in Star Wars, you see, like, you go anywhere and there's a million different aliens that are very different, Hammerhead and, the different, and Jabba and Bosk and, like, I mean, just all these different weird looking things that are clearly, and Yoda, I mean, just Yoda. I mean, Jesus. So you got just this variety that appears in so much science fiction that's not human-centric. And then you got these other things that are just really very human or Samus-centric.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's, and I think, unfortunately, we always have that in the back of our head, that notion of, at some point it's a video game first.
Yeah,
you know what
course.
I mean? And well, I mean, I bring that up because it's a topic in modern day development that I think we struggle with and we talk a lot about, right? Not speaking specifically for my day-to-day life now, but that applies there. But over the past, 10 years or something, I feel like, and we've talked about it probably on every series, on every game we've done so far, where there's this growing up where we feel like we need to have a fully watertight, cohesive, contextualized world and characters and everything that fits together really well. But that can get in the way as well. You know what I mean? And there's something to be said for letting a game be a game with just enough context that it doesn't distract you. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think Darren Stinnett, who we mentioned I think last time as well, it was a perfect example of that split. That he was just willing to wave his hands and say, yeah, whatever, Star Wars. And just like, there's magic. Like, he never felt the need to explain anything.
Yeah.
And we are just of a different stripe. We kind of come along at a different time when it's like, well, we didn't come along when you didn't have a story in your game. We came along when you started to think about having stories. Our first games have, characters and stories. I mean, Indiana Jones, and then the Starfighter games, all the Star Wars games we made. It's very much like we think about this context surrounding a game way more than they did even 5 years before us. Mm-hmm. Which, I mean, this game is basically less than 5 years before us, and there's not nearly as much of that. Although it sounds like some of it comes through in the manual. So, I don't know. But yeah,
yeah, it's
interesting to me. Yeah.
Well, and I will say, speaking just for myself, because I love trying to make things cohesive and contextualized, fully contextualized. However, I would say over my own time making games, I've swung back. Maybe I would like to say I'm maybe a little more balanced, but I've made my own mistakes and realized that you can go too far with that. Do you know what I mean? So kind of, I've definitely been trying to find the balance more over the last few years than I did in the past. Where when I first, like you're talking about, when we both were early in our careers at Lucas specifically, Tomb Raider, same thing. Like, I was drawn to those franchises because I loved working on them and I wanted to make it all work and I wanted to have reasons for everything. And I wanted the fans to really notice all that stuff, but you can go too far with that stuff.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, to a certain degree, you hear about this in film, as well, where it's just like, okay, enough.
Yeah.
I think that was probably the biggest critical complaint I heard about Suicide Squad was...
I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, I'm not going to see it, so I don't care. But I mean, just like, okay, we don't,
too hard.
We don't care. Like, and a lot of these characters we don't care about. Maybe fewer of them would have been better, or maybe just let them be bad people, because they're supposed to be. And you're like giving us all this story about why they're bad people, and like, we don't care.
Yeah,
let them be bad, I don't. I think it's something that popular culture in general, and I think it's a nerd thing.
Yeah,
like
it's
to want that.
Yeah, and you go
want that coherence, to want all those in references, and to know. Like I've been playing this Shadows of Mordor game lately, and a big part of it is this character Celebrimbor, I guess, from the Silmarillion. He's the guy who actually forged the rings. And he's a huge part of it. Like it's really more than anything. It's his story that's kind of important. And at a certain point, I'm just like, yeah, okay.
Well, yeah. Once you're talking about the Silmarillion, you're already kind of there,
Yeah, I know. But that's what kind of world that is.
No,
right? And that's why it appeals to nerds so much, And that's not a dismissive thing. Like I'm a 40-whatever-year-old nerd. It's just at a certain point you're just like, okay, I don't need another cut. Can I?
Yeah, but you're also the guy that Well, you definitely are a nerd, right? I mean, you are.
Thank you.
You are the guy that still hasn't seen the films on purpose. Right?
That's true.
Yeah, because you don't want the books to be ruined. Like, yes, audience, Brett has not seen the films because he doesn't.
The Lord of the Rings movies.
Lord of the Rings movies.
I also haven't seen the Harry Potter movies.
Yeah, and Jen and my wife regrets seeing the movies actually.
Yeah. And you haven't read those books. I mean, while we're picking nits here,
okay,
Tim.
Yeah.
All right.
I have other reasons, but anyway, we'll get into that another day. It's a good topic for sure. And it's a wacky one for games because I really have a hard time. This is a good example. Metroid's a good example because of that balance of game versus, world, I guess I'd say, or fiction, because we talk so much about the games needing to be fun, but once you bring in context and fiction and into a franchise, you kind of have this new goal that pops up, and balancing the two of those things, because sometimes fun is going to be inherently wacky, and the player is going to do what the player is going to do. And this tension is really a pain in the butt, like it's tremendously exciting and challenging and exhilarating to work on that stuff. But finding that balance is really, really, really hard. I've found it, at least.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's take a quick break because wow, we delved into that deep.
Yeah. Where did that come from?
I don't even know. And we'll come back. We'll actually talk some more specifics about what we played, and then I actually have some reader mail, so stay tuned. Welcome back from our break. What else do we want to hit with this section, Tim? I feel like we talked about high level stuff more than we talked about the details of what we actually played.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a combo of high level and details, I guess. But this section, for me at least, was one of the notes I wrote down was kind of revolving around backtracking and world design and world level design combined with kind of the room level design on how you can effectively backtrack and not feel bad about yourself.
Right. Sure.
Do you know what I mean? Like they have some shortcuts. So like, for instance, once you get the super speed boost, right, you can, there's one specific hallway that you can bash through.
Right.
That gives you a shortcut back, right, that you discovered earlier from the other side. And so that was a nice moment. And you also kind of take out some of those really irritating little face hugger guys
right.
In the process. So it kind of shows you the power of that super dash, but also gives you a good shortcut. There definitely were times for me, though, that the backtracking did wear on me. It was in the lava area. Norfair, I think is what it's called.
Sure. Yeah.
Because it's so punishing when you make a mistake in that area.
Yep. I totally agree.
And there's an upper room specifically where I think you go up there. I don't remember what's up there. It may even just have been missiles. But do you remember there's sort of these little mechanical platforms? It's a really big room. And you come into the room from below, from the right.
Yes.
And you move left and you look up and you can't see the ceiling. You can jump up and you can see like there's some of those guys that shoot the blue fireballs that you can't kill. So you got to go up the hallway out, or the sort of the upward shaft outside, and you come up to the top of that same room and there's these little mechanical platforms or something that kind of, that lower when you hit them. So you kind of got to jump one at a time. I missed that jump over to the other side so many times. And you also have to shoot that one metal door that you can actually open with your gun to open it up. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, to a certain extent, I feel like we're getting to the point where our own physical skills are degrading. Like, like even just that original in the very first part of the game where you have to jump back up that long, up and down tunnel of climbing back up to get back to where you can open doors and stuff again. Like the number of times I would miss jumps, I just
and just fall all the way down,
and just fall a long way. Like, okay,
Well, and we haven't played something that hadn't that's had this much platforming in it. I don't think really for the podcast yet. So I was just going to use the opportunity to just mention a couple things as far as like that. It's not a Nintendo only thing, of course, in the era of games and many games way before this, years before this. But it's our first opportunity to talk about, time-based jumps when it comes to how long you're holding the button down, as well combined with air steering while you're in midair, right? And those two things together is this added extra level of skill that really, you second guess yourself and overcorrect a lot, right? And then end up falling and stuff, because there's two vectors there from an input perspective that can really, if you're not good at that stuff, is really going to mess you up. But once you get good at it, you definitely feel like a master. But I've just never been. I think that's why I don't typically gravitate toward platformers, because I never become good at them.
Yeah, I mean, I'm different. I do love a platformer. Like I got all 151 stars in Super Mario Galaxy. Like I put in the time. Yeah. And I do love those games. And actually, there is such a pleasure in doing a thing that you're like, I know there's maybe, I don't know, fewer than 100,000 people in the world, certainly. Probably fewer than 10,000 people in the world who have actually done this, and it's just like, that's a cool thing, it's it would be equivalent, to, I don't know, walking the Pacific Crest Trail, right? It's like a thing that not a lot of people have done. And it's not that it's impossible for most people to do. It might be difficult because of a million different reasons, but it's not literally impossible. And when I played, there's one particularly very, very difficult level in Super Mario Galaxy. It was the last one I did, where getting good enough to do it, there's a feeling at the end of that, like, I knew I could do it. I just had to put in the time. I had to get better at it. I had to come up with a plan to figure out what I was going to do to get through this particular level. And for those who've played it, it's the levels where you're jumping around on a pixelated Luigi or a pixelated Mario. That won't mean anything to you, Tim, but people who've played, but basically the floor is disappearing wherever you touch. So you basically have to think about what you're going to do. And you have to use every type of jump you have. And there is like this groove when we play these games that have skill bases that you're like, that's a thing that people like to be able to do, to be able to gain physical mastery over a thing. Like, to do a thing that's physical, regardless of what it is just compelling. Yeah. I spent some time this weekend, which is, 2 too much information for most people, but I had some plumbing issues in my kitchen, and I had to do all kinds of stuff, take apart pipes and snake things, and once you've done that and put it all back together and you run the water and there's no leaks, it's just nice. Yeah. It just feels good, right? I mean, it's just like I did that thing. You put your fists on your hips and you look kind of up and to the right like Superman, I did that. Yeah, that was me.
I mean, and that's the thing is for me, the Twitch skill comes in, I think, with shooters. That's probably where I'm not stellar at them, I guess I'd say, but it's where my comfort zone is, and I really enjoy those as sort of successful, high skill moments that really get my adrenaline going. And I think with platforming, and I mentioned specifically the two vectors of input that this game has, and a lot of the Nintendo platformers, and really platformers of this era and the previous era. But I think my frustration often comes, you mentioned it in there, with what you get a kick out of and adrenaline from with Mario. I see what I need to do. I already know what I need to do. And I just can't execute, you know what I mean? And so I get more, every time I fall, I get more and more frustrated, you know what I mean? And then just throw the controller or what have you. So I think it's just why I don't know why why that doesn't happen to me with shooters, specifically, or first person games.
It's interesting. Some games, because I am like that in some games. I mean, today I actually just put down the DLC for Shadows of Mordor because it just was too much. Mm-hmm. There's a section where it was like, okay, well, so for whatever reason, you aren't quite as powerful in the DLC as you were in the game. Like, one of the DLCs you are, and then in the next one you aren't. So for whatever reason, you're not quite as awesome as you were. And so some of the things you could do, you can't, you don't have as many shots in your quiver and whatever. And that can make, once you've played a part of a game where you're like super powered up, and then you get knocked back to like halfway, you're just like, ugh. Mm-hmm. Like, I was relying on that. Like, how I play is based on what resources are available to me, and now that has changed, and now I haven't come up with a new strategy. And meanwhile, the level of difficulty of the challenges has gotten actually quite a bit harder than the base game, and I'm just, at a certain point, I'm just like, you know what? I'm done. I love the base game. I actually like the first expansion a lot, but this one, maybe not so much. And I'm not hooked by the lore, so replaying these missions just doesn't do it for me. I totally get it. I mean, it's the same thing. I know what I have to do. I know I can come up with a plan, and I guess it's not as physical to a certain extent. Like,
it's probably more timing based, right?
It is. There's a lot of timing stuff, like and managing the resources well. So it's like, okay, I only have this many arrows, so I have to keep that in mind as I'm doing these things, so that I have plenty of arrows to do the next thing and whatever, and it's frustrating because it's like, oh, I used to have lots more. So, but the physical things don't grind me that way. I think it's just because there's a lot of time. You fail. A lot of these things, that these levels in Mario or whatever are done in 2 or 3 minutes, and this is more like 15, and you're just like, I don't want to spend another 15 minutes.
Yeah, that's fair. The time commitment. I think the other thing that Nintendo's always been good at, and I think the best games of this era, separate from Nintendo, were always good at, is that at the very least you blame yourself, right? Like, it is a skill, and we talk about this in game development, nearly every day, at least I do, with the team. It's just like, it's like you want the player to feel like they have ownership over their mistakes rather than the game punishing them. It's kind of game development 101 stuff, but you don't want people to feel like the game is fighting them and being the roadblock. So and I think as we kind of start, we talked about this throughout many episodes of the podcast, as we as developers start hand-holding more and doing more for the player, we're getting in the way more of their accomplishments, you know what I mean? And so we're gonna be more to blame for their errors than they would if they had more ownership over their skills. So.
Oh yeah, that's an excellent point.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really what's going on with, this Shadow of Mordor example I'm giving, is that it's not that I'm not actually pretty darn good at the game. I've spent 30 or 40 hours or whatever with it. I'm pretty good at the game for a whatever-year-old man I am. And
the game's getting in the way.
It is exactly that. Yeah, the game is getting away. The challenge hasn't kept pace with the things that they've given me. They've changed what they've given me and things like that. Like, they've kind of messed up the rhythm I had gotten into. And that's not on me. And they haven't given me enough time to get used to that new rhythm. So, interesting. Yeah.
A couple other quick small things we talked about a little bit at during the break that I wanted to mention. Just kind of going back to the economical design, just like really, I mean, it's funny to say because this is an older game, but I feel like this is just one of the best games I've played in a long time, which is great to say after all these years. But some small, simple things that we mentioned, like, for instance, once you unlock a door via one of the weapon keys, like a red door from the missiles or something, it turns blue there ever after. So, it's that forward-centric reward cycle where, these days a lot of games would just, make you use the missiles every time you go through the door. But the fact that, it's just a small thing, people probably don't even notice it when they play naturally.
It respects your intelligence. It says, hey, you figured out how to get through these doors.
Yeah, you're not going to want to do this again.
Yeah, now you don't have to waste the resources every time.
Another quick one, the use of enemy variance, I think, is really mastercraft kind of stuff when it comes to, they have an enemy archetype that walks on walls, and then they have different variations of that one, right? It's all same base tech and AI, but then they just kind of do a coat of paint and a little bit different behavior and different context. And they just get
more resistant to shots and, whatever.
Some are invulnerable, some are on fire. It's like, it's just a masterclass in just the slight variables on enemy variance. And of course, a lot of that is production related as well, right? They want to reuse stuff, but
I love that it often seems to come out of the ecology.
Yeah. They've fully...
Right? Like, they dip into lava, and of course they're impervious to the lava because they've grown up in lava, right? I was born and raised in a briar patch.
Well, like, to your point about her design, right? Like, they do the same thing with the enemies as well, right? They're cohesive within the context that they're shown and played, and just really well done stuff there.
Yeah, good point.
Some other things here I'm looking through. Oh, one of the flaws that bums me out, that's kind of minor, but on the map, it is possible to reveal, blue is when you haven't been there, right? And then pink is, or cyan is when you have been there, and the little white dots are locations of items you can get. And it's possible to reveal a blue square with a dot in it, but without getting the item. So, you can't completely use the blue and pink as a way to understand if you've gotten one of those items or not. Because you can fill in that pink room and miss the item and then not realize there's really no way other than memory for you to know if you've gotten that or not.
Yeah, I would say that the biggest innovation in these games, and it's really just a user experience thing, really, than a real innovation, but is just like putting in the game, and particularly in the map, knowing what you need to open certain doors and all that stuff.
There's no door recognition at all. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So, I mentioned Headlander does this. Another game that I wanted to mention because it's fantastic and I loved it is Guacamelee, which is a few years old now, but it's totally a Metroidvania. Fantastic game. Wonderful, beautiful 2D animation. Wonderful setting. It's like a Mexican Day of the Dead sort of thing. Yeah. It's terrific. I can't sing its praises enough. It is a fantastic game and a beautiful game. And it plays on all this stuff. It has a little more story than really this game does, at least in terms of the surface. It's this luchador, one of those Mexican wrestling dudes, who is trying to regain his girlfriend, basically. But he's been killed, and now he has all these, powers of the dead, and it's...
Wow. I've heard of it since it came out. I just haven't gotten around to it.
It is a terrific game. I would recommend it to anyone. But again, the innovations there are primarily like you can look at the map and go, oh yeah, I haven't been through that thing yet, and that's because I couldn't turn into a chicken yet. Oh, so I should be able to go back there, and now that I can turn into a chicken, I can do that. So, and yes, you can turn into a chicken.
I'm sold.
Game of the decade.
So I guess that hits kind of a bunch of the stuff that little notes that I had piled up there.
I did want to at least bring up a topic that we got a couple of emails about. One from Matthew Estock, another one from a gentleman named Clinton. Clinton writes, I heard your first episode on Super Metroid and immediately thought that you guys should probably touch on the speedrunning aspect of Super Metroid. Speedruns are pretty popular nowadays with the GDQ, which is Games Done Quick, marathons gaining lots of publicity. One of their runners was on the Colbert Show and raising millions for charity. That being said, Super Metroid speedruns are remarkably interesting for me because they rely more on high-skill level movement and optimization to make the speedrun rather than glitch exploitation, which is present but not a main driving aspect. You touched on the wall jump, which is a thing that kind of isn't really explored or understood or deeply needed. But I know that is key in some ways to the speedruns. I looked up a little bit about this, like that if you can do the wall jump, you can get to some places early and therefore get weapons and whatever power-ups early because you can reach places that most players won't be able to reach. Right?
Interesting. Yeah.
And so I know that's part of it. I don't know. Do you have any experience with the speedrunning community or whatever, et cetera?
I don't have a lot of direct experience, though I will say it is a big part of the Halo community. There's definitely a lot of speedrunners. We even have a couple who on the team who are great developers in their own right, but they also are speedrunners. So it's definitely an interesting perspective because in Halo's case, there's a lot of physics oriented gameplay and systems in place, right? So people tend to utilize and exploit that quite a bit. So it'd be different than in this game, but it's a fascinating thing. I definitely don't watch enough of that stuff because I'm sure it's pretty impressive.
Yeah, for me, I mean, it's funny because, as a programmer, I want to write these systems that are, to design and bulletproof and fun. And often the speedruns exploit the lack of bulletproofing, for lack of a better way to explain it. Like, so they're like actively the enemy in that sense, right? I mean, it's I don't know if anybody. I've never looked to see if anybody's tried to do speedruns of games that you or I have worked on. I'm sure that's true. At Bethesda, there actually was for every title, the dev team and the QA team choose a champion to square off and play at the same time.
That's awesome.
And use different sorts of exploits and things like that to get through the games as quickly as possible. And it's like a couple of hours to do the main quest. But the things that they do, often they have different things that they've figured out. And if they actually talk together, they could probably cut their times by another half hour or something like that. But it's like in Fallout 3, you could interrupt conversations that were basically cutscene. I mean, like unskippable. The NPCs would accost you, and you would be forced into dialogue, and dialogue is slow. But if you punch them, it interrupts that, and they go straight into combat, and they don't have the dialogue, and you can skip past that. So there's like things like that. Or in Skyrim, there was a dragon, whatever, shout that let you basically run across space, and if you had that, you could circumvent some dungeons. Like you could just basically, I'm just going to skip around here, and if your timing was right, so it was things like that they had all learned to kind of speed run the game.
That's great.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. So that's my own experience with speed running. It's kind of, I don't know if anybody's tried to do it with. I do listen. I mean, to throw out Idle Thumbs talks about the speedrunning stuff normally when it's on, and one of the things they described this year was like reprogramming basically the ROM of, I don't know, one of the Mario games to just do the craziest stuff. And it was basically a debug mode or something, but they did it programmatically. You could do it with button presses, theoretically. But they basically wrote a robot to go and just do all this stuff for them, to do all these button presses, to basically reprogram memory to make it a different game.
Wow.
It's wild, the stuff that comes out of these things, and I think it's super interesting. I'm less interested in that, but I do think it often explores the sort of underlying things that happen, in game development.
Yeah, I mean, we are a medium that is uniquely able to do something like that, right? Where something can have a life well beyond its release, and have these sort of exploits and deeper kind of understanding of something that the developers didn't even intend. Like no game ships without bugs, right? And it's just a thing. And in the Halo world, there's been conversations where we have debated fixing a bug or not because of that.
Yeah.
It's like, this is an exploit that the fans have discovered and want to embrace and do. We could fix it.
We could patch it. Yeah,
we could, but it's like, so I think it's really fun and exciting and weird when we have those conversations, where we're actually intentionally thinking about that, because you don't want to in some cases, you don't want to take that power away from them.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think that, I'm sort of, to a certain degree, I'm of the mind that once a thing is out, it's out there, and do what you will with it, and I'm certainly a person that when I play games, I will exploit things. When I figure out how things work, I will go, oh, okay, I can do, in Warcraft, shooting through walls, perfect example. Figured out I could do that. Oh boy, did I make use of that, throughout the rest of the game. And I'm, to a certain degree, I'm totally fine with that, because otherwise you get, digital Jabba the Hutt, and Han not shooting first. So, anyway.
And we digress on that.
I guess that cut me pretty deep. Anyway, thank you, Matthew Estock and Clinton. Chase Daedalus was the email name I had. We appreciate those comments and welcome them at devgameclub@gmail.com. I read every email. I may not reply to every email. If I don't think we'll read it on the air, I do try to reply. So please send in those comments, and we'd love to hear them. So sometimes they make it onto the cast, or even into Bill Roper's ear, as it turned out a couple weeks ago. Okay, so what's next?
No, I think it covered it. I think we have, I would say, though, we should probably, we'll close down this episode, but next time let's focus on bosses a little more. I think there's probably a lot to talk about there, even ones we played this session.
Yep.
I think we'll hit a bunch more, next session, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of different, a lot of variety there to talk about. But otherwise, To that end, I'm going to suggest, instead of trying to play to finding certain power-ups, which we heard from somebody, those are optional in some cases, we're going to play to the boss Dragon. I don't know what Dragon looks like, so I don't know, but I do. Well, roughly.
I'm sure you do, because I'm sure it's in the manual.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, we're going to play up until Dragon, and then to whatever. Oh boy, that is one ugly thing. It's sort of like I don't know. It's got like a exposed belly and sort of looks lizardy, kind of.
It's got some fish things. It's in the water area, so I'm betting it's kind of a weird combo. It's got it's a little Lovecraftian in its name. Dagon, Dragon. Yeah.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, and it sort of looks like, it's got lots of limbs, but is also up in the air.
Yeah, it's a mashup. Basically.
It looks like a prawn. It looks like a giant green prawn. Anyway, so beat Dragon and whatever save point comes near after that. So you probably pick up some other power ups and things like that, but save after Dragon. If you're using an emulator, you can actually just save at that point. Most emulators just save off the complete contents of memory, and we'll move from there for the final show. So that's what we're gonna aim for.
Sounds good.
Okay. In the meantime, you can find me at Brett_Duville on Twitter, and he's
at Tim Longo Jr. with the JR in the end.
JR at the end, yep. And the podcast itself is at Dev Game Club. I try to check that once or twice a day, so I am on there listening and watching and trying to reply. And as I mentioned already, you can find us at devgameclub@gmail.com or on the web at www.devgameclub.com. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah.
Good night.
Good night.